Welcome to the New South Wales Government's Business Connect webcasts on business disruption. My name is Steve Witt, Business Centre Connect Advisor, but also the CEO of the Business Centre. The Business Connect program is a dedicated program funded by the New South Wales Government and delivered through a network of dedicated independent service providers to help you start, adapt or grow your small business. Now, at any time there's a business disruption in our economy and in our society, it affects our personal lives, and there's an impact as humans. But perhaps one of the sectors that has been most hardest hit at this time are live venues, the music industry, and the direct flow-on effect to venues and those people that operate them and on the performers that perform in them. Tonight we'd like to look and have a view of this from the perspective of the small business owner and the operator of these venues, or performance artists that work in these venues, pub owners, small bar owners, people that run live music events and operators of businesses in the sector. So to discuss the enormous impact and how we have to deal with this and what we can do to get through it or adapt or prevail, we have three wonderful guests, very interesting people, each in their own right, who are going to give their own perspectives, but all of them are equally passionate from their own perspective about the way we can go about sustaining this business through this and what happens next and how we can keep people employed in the sector. So we're hoping through a discussion tonight to address the commonly held fears, talk through the threats, but also look towards a new way of dealing with this extraordinary situation that has evolved and truly tested the viability of live venues and places for performers and the entertainment industry overall. So I'm going to introduce our guests. We'll start with the first guest on my left, who is Mark Tinson. Now, Mark is a renowned and well-regarded musician and performer that many in our audience would be aware of in the industry. He's also a songwriter. Mark performed in some legendary Australian bands, born of the highly formative and influential pub rock scene, such as Rabbit, Heroes, Swanee, the Sex Pistols and TMG. Mark is also now a record producer and sound engineer, or Mark, as Tino as he's often known, has worked with some of the biggest names in Australian music and has mentored the Screaming Jets in Silverchair. Mark, thank you so much for your time tonight, and we're hoping to extract some wisdom.
Oh, okay. See how that works.
Okay, next I'd like to introduce Rolly DeWitt. Rolly is owner and managing director of the Junction Hotel, but a former owner of a number of other industry venues which would house and have live performers, such as nightclubs and pubs. But Rolly also brings a broader industry experience as a person that works within the Australian Hoteliers Association, and he's occasionally a spokesperson for the industry and is a strong hotel industry advocate. So thank you for bringing your broad experiences and range of views to this conversation tonight, Rolly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lastly, we also have Gabe with us. Gabe is a musician and drummer, although Mark was contending whether drummers should be in the musician category.
No, I was just interested to see the description.
Gabe features in a number of bands. He's an accomplished producer in his own right. He's got a recording studio, but he's worked in bands such as Bloody Hell, Soda, Frankie's House Band and Dave. And Gabe works across a number of music genres, and we were having a conversation about that earlier before we started, that indeed even that is a factor at the moment about what sort of music is conducive to COVID and what is not. So we'll get the conversation going, and the first conversation we love to start with everybody that's come in and had a conversation with us about this area of disruption and COVID is, how has this been for you? How have you experienced it? What's it been like? And we'll kick off with you, Mark.
Well, for me, the music industry is not just playing music. So I started out being a guitar player, a musician, and then I had a parallel career almost as a record producer, recording engineer. Then I moved into live sound, and I actually worked for Rolly for many, many years, not only as a musician, but as a live sound operator. So what I've got is a broad range of skills. And I think for someone like me, and I've been doing it for 50 years, COVID has been just a chance to actually sit back, have a breather.
Yeah.
I've still got a clientele for my recording studio.
Yes.
I've lost a lot of live sound work,
Yes.
but you know, maybe it's just, you just go, well, it's time for that to stop anyway.
Yeah.
I do a lot of teaching as well.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just a case of, okay, I've still got some balls in the air
Yeah.
in terms of earning some money.
Yeah.
Because I've run what I do as a business, I'm open to JobKeeper.
Yeah.
So it hasn't impacted me enormously financially. I've still got a good business running.
Yeah.
But what it's meant is that I can actually look at what I'm doing and go, you know, I can do some things for me now. I've got some time.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing is I've been mixing a whole pile of live recordings I've done over the last 3 years.
Yes.
I'll put that out as a record and do a concert to go with it. Okay. So what I'm doing is thinking, okay, that's a big project, but it's looking forward. So I can use that as a model for other things that I do after
so
that.
It's given time to review, time to recalibrate.
Absolutely.
It's not just been a wasted impact.
Yeah, but you know, what's allowed me to do that is I've had a long time building up a studio clientele, especially. Okay. So the other thing is with teaching, you've got a model. So I'm in a high risk group now. I'm over 60.
Mm-hmm. No, can't
and
be
a
right.
bit. So face-to-face teaching, I probably need to a little bit less of that in the COVID environment.
Let's listen, Rolly, what's it been like for you with you know, operating your business and operating a venue?
Obviously, owning a venue and then being closed for 10 weeks, reopening and then operating it at 30% of what we were previously, having a large staff, financial commitments. But what I think and what I've seen with a lot of people that are in the industry is the emotional toll that it has been taken on operators.
Yes.
Some have handled it well, and some have seen opportunities to do things differently. But overall, it's as we see the threat of COVID coming back or another surge, that's where there's an unknown. So it is extremely difficult for venue operators in Newcastle. Well, I think Newcastle has been synonymous with live music.
Yes.
We have had interventions in the past. We've had disruptions. We've had the earthquake, which we've adapted and come out of. But we've also had licensing restrictions put on 12 years ago, which were a major disruptor to live music in the city. And now's the time, I think, to redress that as well.
Yeah, I guess, and Mark, you know, pub rock in Australia was seminal. It was a place where so much came from. It arose from that environment, from that type of.
Well, and you had international success from that. You know, Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil, AC/DC, all came out of that pub rock scene. And if you imagine going back and going, with the restrictions that we have now, imposing that on you know, AC/DC back in the day, it's like, would they have ever stepped outside of Australia? Gabe,
for you, because you play in a number of bands, you record, you know, you've got quite a busy and hectic life. What has it been like for you?
Well, COVID for me, like at first I was really upset, but then I realised that it was the break I wasn't really willing to give myself. Just gigging so consistently for like the last 4 or 5 years, like 140 gigs a year or something like that, and then booking music for 13 venues I was, and then all of a sudden my life went from gig to just no gigs, like 0 gigs, playing and booking. And so it's pretty good. I kind of focused on a lot of the small things and just focused on taking care of myself a little bit as well, which was good. But I was lucky because I had a job other than music, because I've always kind of liked having another job, because then it keeps music as like the thing I like doing rather than the thing which like I'm relying on for an income all of the time. And so I could get JobKeeper from like the restaurant I work at, but I felt really bad for a lot of the musos who I was actually doing booking work for, who weren't eligible, because a lot of it was just like cashies and stuff like that. And so they couldn't get any assistance from the government, and all of a sudden like their only source of income was just gone.
We spoke earlier last week about your concerns about musicians themselves in regards to being ready to start performing again when these venues are up and operating. that you're concerned about some people losing, and we may lose some musicians, or they may lose their musicianship because they don't have the chance to perform.
Yeah, well, for example, one of my favourite bands messaged me saying that they were decided to call it a day, like during this period. But I just think there will be a lot of bands who lose their momentum from live shows, because a lot of them, like obviously some bands have the internet presence and everything, and they're still like releasing songs on Spotify and everything. But some bands, I think, if they're not rehearsing and they're not gigging, like they might not make it out of this. Like they won't make it out the other side, I think.
Okay, I'd like to take it a little bit further with that and look specifically at each of you just reflecting a little on what are the real challenges going to be as a result of this. It won't be with us forever, but it's certainly likely to be with us for somewhat longer than now. What are the challenges going to be? Is this, we just heard today, I think that in South Australia there are another 17 cases, and things can flare up again. So what are the challenges going to be? What are they from your perspective, Mark?
Well, with live music, I would think the biggest challenge is how can we get enough people in to make it worthwhile, not only to run the venue, but to also pay the musicians. So what you've got is the opportunity, I guess, for venues to go, how can we do this differently? Now, if you look at Jimmy Barnes played in town at Lazotte's a couple of weeks ago, sold out 2 performances. Now, normally, Barnes can go and sell thousands of tickets, but in that space, what they did was they sold virtual tickets to the show. And they sold 4 times as many virtual tickets as they did seats in the venue. So you have to go, for Jimmy Barnes, that's a pretty easy sell. But then for younger artists that are starting out, I think we have to realise that those artists have got to be able to create a product, whether it be them performing or whether it be a combination of that and recordings that they offer for sale. They've got to build up a demand for that. And maybe you have to look back and go, well, how did we do it in the early days? And we didn't depend on pubs to hire us when we first started out. We put on our own dancers. You'd hire a community hall. I don't know what regulations would say about that, noise especially. But you need to build up your own audience. And I think what's lost in the music industry now is that idea, everybody's looking to be at the top. They want to tour the world, tread the biggest stages. But music really is a community thing, you know. And if you can't have your community embracing you or helping you along, you're probably not going to get to that next level. So I found when I was growing up and first starting performing, we had kids at school would come and see us. We had our friends would come and see us. I think that whole idea of community needs to be explored a bit more, instead of the idea that you have an online community, which is actually not very real. You know, and to get those people that may be watching you online to actually fork out some money to keep you going, it's a big ask, you know, especially when there's so much of it.
Gabe, I know that there's an app, I think Parlour, I can't remember what it's called, where people can book, you know, an act and have them, you know, come to a home, and you know, I think we can have gatherings up to 30 people in our home where you're probably paying a higher dividend for that performance, but you're getting an exclusive performance by a performer. Have you heard of that type of thing? I
actually haven't. Hey, I think I've heard it maybe mentioned before, but I've never really looked into it myself.
Well, so that house concert idea is very much in the area of older people. You know, maybe somebody in the valley has got a big house and they've got a community of friends who are happy to pay $30 or $40 to come. There might be a limit of 30 people. The artist walks out with $1,200. You know?
Rolly, for you, what are the challenges as you see them right now?
So the onus is on the venue operator or venue owner to comply with all the safety plans. And so at times we are the fun police. And the pressure is on us to make sure that we're all adequately spaced, that we're complying with numbers, that we're not standing. And it's so easy for somebody, for a patron or a guest to stand. It's the pressure that's on the venue operator, and we're normally about fun. We're normally we're creating, and to Mark's point, It's about creating that outlet, the social fabric of each little niche suburb where people come together. Now we're excluding a lot of people and saying, okay, I can only fit a certain number in, and
so tell me,
that's it.
You and I spoke about this last week when we met with Mark, and I read through the regulations as they were then, and I believe still are. It's quite technical, and we're also talking about the regulation of that and who is monitoring and imposing that regulation for the sake of all of us. It's quite technical. How are you finding, speaking to your colleagues and people in the industry, wrestling with this rack of regulations and still trying to run your venue and have performers?
There's incredible confusion because also the regulations differ from state to state. So of course a patron hears something which would be applicable for Queensland, and they think that it applies here. Yes, I understand that we need to look at New South Wales solely. There is, I guess, confusion about why so many people can go to a sporting arena and be denied going to a concert.
Yes.
The government, yes, should be congratulated on some of the initiatives and the funding that they have made available, but obviously then more needs to be done, and it needs to be easy for venues, live music operators, bands to access that funding, to say, okay, that they've now reduced the restrictions to 50% capacity. Well, that applies to cinemas, to theatres, and to concert halls.
Yes.
Well, quite a few venues have fallen through. Well, the vast majority that doesn't apply to.
Yes.
And the risk is that some of the venues will fall through the cracks.
Yes.
And if we just look at Newcastle, there's still 3 live entertainment or late night venues, hotels that have not reopened.
Yes.
Because it's not viable for them to operate at
and
this
that would be similar to, I guess, a number of other regions across New South Wales where that
will be the
peculiar
same.
situation could occur.
Yeah.
Gabe, you had a good insight, I thought, when we spoke about that if you want to have a band, then a band's a group of people, and they'll all want to get an income from that event. But I thought the idea you had that if we want to have bands, and as we grow out of this and we get a little bit more or less regulation, and the government support and funding has been great, you made a really good suggestion about some funding that could go to performers, particularly bands, where a solo artist can probably come in with their PA, quickly set up their system and get a good wage for the night. Whereas if it's a band,
Well,
you want to just give us that.
yeah, well,
that
there's
thought
two things. Like, firstly, like for example, with a small venue such as like the Ori, like if you have a band, say a 4 or 5 piece, but then you're only allowed 20 people in the room, that eats into that. So not only is like the band taking up the capacity, but then that's also less money the business is going to make because there's less patrons there consuming food and alcohol. And so it's just harder for like certain music. It's like there's just like most of the venues I've been booking is strictly soloists. Like I cannot book bands at many venues anymore, like at this stage. But I kind of agree with Rolly with the sport thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I love sport, but I just don't understand the difference between 40,000 people screaming for their teams when they're probably consuming alcohol as well, like they would be at the pub, and how that's any better than 20 people in a pub singing along to some artist they're trying to support. But that's just what I think.
So, I mean, when we look at the economic figures, the contribution that music and the creative industry makes to our economy is significant, probably much larger than sport, for example. How do we keep this going? How do we ensure that we still are able to have a music industry and venues, therefore, and the thousands of workers that underpin the roadies, techies, hospitality workers, security staff, etc. How do we keep it going?
Well, I think there's some venues in Newcastle which are doing a pretty good job. Like, as in this period, I think one of the main things you have to do is adapt, and until like we're back to where we were. But like, for example, the Cambridge, I think what they've been doing with the seated shows and doing the 2 shows in the one night, like when Dave did our album launch and we sold 220 tickets and sold heaps of merch. And so for us, it was still like profitable, and same as the Cambridge, like it was worth them putting on the show. But I guess it also, the main thing with that is space. So like the bigger venues can do that, whereas the smaller venues, the smaller pubs, it's just harder for them to do it.
An interesting outcome with COVID is, I think, for a long time, music has been undervalued.
Yes.
So particularly with younger audiences, they'll buy one song instead of a whole album. Because once upon a time, the album was the way you educated yourself to what was happening. Also, so people, you'll notice that there's a comeback of vinyl. So, and people are paying, $30, $40, $50 for some vinyl. They could buy the CD equivalent for $20. So I think what's happening with that is people are going, actually music has a bit more value. And how that translates into the live area is that people have gone without music, live music, and they're going, actually I really miss that.
And I value it.
And now they're prepared to pay a little bit more. Now I don't know if that's just, I'm more a heritage act now, I guess. So, but that audience likes to sit down as well. So it's kind of it's working for me on that side.
I think you make a good observation.
So whereas once upon a time you might charge $30 a ticket, you might get that up to $40, $45 a ticket. People are happy to pay it now. And again, I think if with the younger audiences, they're now actually going, actually, I can't just go, I want it now. I have to book a ticket. And I have to do it in advance. And I have to actually anticipate that event, which I think is part of what we used to have earlier on with music, is you anticipated going to see the band you wanted and not, you didn't just decide to go and see it 5 minutes before.
It was a scarce resource that was valued.
So I think, maybe, I hope that we're actually getting, people will start to value what we do a little bit more and actually be prepared to pay to get into place. So instead of going, I'm not paying to get in, I pay enough for the drinks inside.
We've got a young person here. What are your thoughts on that different business model where, for your band, for what you do, what do you think about that?
I think one thing is different acts which I play in kind of go down better than others, like as I was saying before. So like with my jazz band, like I've found that's been really good in this period because it's great music for when people are sitting down and slowly sipping a glass of red wine. But for certain things like covers bands and stuff where it's usually like people at a function or like an event, like, and they want to get up and have a boogie, but instead they just have to sit on their chair and just watch you play covers. Like it kind of doesn't really go down as well as it should.
So, Rolly, different business models.
Yes, exactly. I think now there is an opportunity to charge probably what we needed to charge to see a show, whereas I think we've always supplemented the price, which then put pressure on the band. So pressure in that they were not being paid enough. And we hear it all the time where young people are now complaining that they missed out on the show. They didn't get in quick enough and buy their tickets. So, and I know it's the case. And I think I'm, like Mark, hoping that there'll be a resurgence. And nothing is going to work unless we have support from the community for live entertainment. We've seen it wane over the years through different circumstances, but I think the time is right.
I think
and we look at opportunities, and I think in our city we have opportunities to utilise different venues as well. Whether it becomes a festival, whether we use the Civic Theatre a little bit more, whether we look at the opportunity at Newcastle Station to put events on at the top end of town. I think Newcastle City Council are doing an incredible job. I think they're open-minded now, and that's really what we want. Rather than the answer being no straight away, they are considering the question and are saying yes.
Well, I've observed some of the reading I did for our conversation today that indeed different business models are coming up. So they're putting three groups through, for example. One of the other ones that was common to the idea that you also shared, people are pre-purchasing, so it's a $40 voucher so that you're going to have a $40 spend and you're going to have to use that on the bar or in merchandise or food. But harking back to your days when you began in music, I mean, there were different ways. There were ticketed shows. There was a combination of ticketing and a fee. So it could be a resurgence of that again.
Let's hope so. But I think one point to consider too is a venue operator like Rolly, he's not obliged to hire musicians or anybody in the music industry. I think part of what Rolly does, and he has done forever, is he understands that the synergy between musicians, community and running the venue.
Yes.
So I guess we just have to be a little bit more community minded with that, so that we go, okay, maybe I'm not here just to make money as a venue, although that's very important, but I'm also here to foster talent in the community. And, you know, there's enough data around to tell us that a community that's got a strong music base or a school that has a strong music program, everybody does much better overall.
I think you're right. And when I started putting this discussion together and some of the themes that we were going to be talking about, was this about venues? Was it about small business operators? Was it about performers? Was it about musicians? And I think it's about everybody. We need music. We need that in our community, and we need places for people to do that. And often the places that happens are people that operate a business or people that operate a venue, and so it's all connected. All of it is connected.
Yeah. But one of the other things I've managed to do during the COVID break is I've been working on setting up an internet radio station with Newcastle Live. So, you know, we're kind of treating our downtime as an opportunity to develop a new business.
So indeed, I did a research on you and your band. The disruption that was caused by, you know, an incident in Newcastle actually led to you guys getting a record contract. So disruption is good.
A disruption.
Huh?
They called it a riot back then. Now it's a disruption. Okay.
All right. So
public disobedience.
You need to read the book.
That's right.
To get the truth.
to get to the bottom of it. So look, I want to ask, in all of this time, we have seen innovation, you know, and one of the things we've concentrated on these webcasts is that the you know, a disruption, a crisis actually has danger and opportunity. So maybe let's look at some of that, and I'm sure between the four of us we can share some things that we've seen that are quite innovative and ways that people have done things differently. Might start with you, Gabe. Have you seen different ways of doing things that's come about as a result of this?
Well, one venue which I think has done a good job and deserves a shout out is definitely the Lass Gary. So the main thing they did was they stopped having music inside when they could only have maybe, I don't know what the capacity is because they haven't had any shows since, but they moved all their music outside into the beer garden. So then they could have full bands playing and then they could have more people there watching. And it's still free entry, so people have still been able to access a live gig for free. And still paying the musicians quite well as well.
So, Rolly, that's a structural thing in a business, you know, that I know your venue that you've currently got at the moment doesn't have that capacity. I mean, we're talking about that. But that's a cost, isn't it? And it might be something that people are going to have to consider in their business models.
A lot of business will be constrained, and then of course you've got to consider your immediate neighbourhood. So it may not be that you don't want to create conflicts with the amenity of your neighbourhood, and it is
buy a house
very
next
complex.
to a pub and then whinge about
but
the
if
music.
Exactly. But if I look at things that have happened, and it was with the government as well. So Great Southern Nights is a great initiative. We just need to see more of that type of thing. So we probably need to lean on government a little bit more, or bureaucrats to have a little bit more of that happening. But I agree with Mark, it is all of us together that's going to bring about or achieve survival, and that's really what it is, because we are unfortunately going to lose some good acts and we're going to lose some good venues.
As a result of it. I mean, one of the other things you spoke about, Gabe, was a chance for community to be more engaged and to have events that are outdoor, that connect one suburb to another by people working together, musicians, performers, working together with community to create events at a time like this, which I think, and I shared with you, in my own street where I live, just as a result of this, right in March, April, people that lived up from us that were musos opened their garage up and and played music to the street, and it connected community right away. And maybe there's something that in the line of what you spoke about is possible where we could do that. So tell us a bit about that idea.
I think venues working together is definitely a good idea as well. I don't know, in small communities, for example in Carrington, there's a lot of music happening in Carrington at the moment. That's where my studio is as well. I've always thought a cool thing would be doing a King Street crawl, but then a Carrington crawl, and just having people go from one end of Carrington to other, but then also not just having the music venues involved, having all the places, all the shops, Frankie's Noodles and every shop in Carrington being open, and even having maybe street food and everything, and just obviously in line with regulation, but just trying different things I think is a good idea.
And when we were talking about it, Mark, you were saying it doesn't necessarily to be the rock and roll, drugs and rock and roll and alcohol. It could really be a community event where where it's got full community participation through music and venues being connected.
Yeah, and if you look just slightly out of the music industry, a mate of mine ran a little dog festival. It was called Doggy Day Out. But one of the biggest impedances to that was getting permission to close a portion of the road. Yeah. And it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to block off one block of road. And you go, well, I think we need to just get rid of that model, so that if we do want to run community events, councils and the police and everybody that's associated with that actually go, this is a great idea, let's not price it out of existence. Yes. Let's actually put something into it and have a great community event. Because, you've got people that sell food, you've got musicians, you've got little dogs if you run a little dog event, all of that sort of stuff. I just think, there has been so many things blocking community events, I think. And also, what happens with community events, we get they're family friendly, which usually means we're not going to pay any of the artists. So you get a fairly low level of artists. So consequently, people don't really want to come out to that. So, or people that like music aren't going to come out to that. So we need to lift that level as well, so that we do have some great acts performing at these community events, and not just the local talent school. No, it's a good point, what you said earlier about realising the true value of musicians. But the other thing, if you look at Blues Fest in Byron Bay, they've got an almost entire Australian lineup coming up next year. Yes. Let's hope it still goes ahead.
This is an upside of this particular situation, isn't it? With events and festivals, if they begin to open up, 500 and above, it's maybe not viable at 500 for a number of events, but it will guarantee a free run for Australian talent because of the bubble, won't it? Yeah.
And put those acts in front of all of us, and there's opportunities for those bands.
So we're moving towards the end of our conversation. But I'd like to sort of, as we get towards the end, to if you've got any tips, the experience that comes from wisdom about your reflections over this time, and what we can possibly share with others that are going through this or going through it at a different time in a different way. What would you pass on as tips to get through this from your perspective, Mark?
Well, I think for anybody in the music industry, you have to be prepared. If you want to be a music industry professional, you need to have a lot more arrows in your quiver than just I play guitar and sing okay. You need to be looking at if you're playing an instrument, are you good enough to teach that instrument? Because that can be a valuable income stream. Can I think about other associated things like operating sound, not only for myself but for somebody else? Graphic art is another area that you could look at. All of these skills that are part of the music industry, if you've only got one of those, you're probably going to have to get a job doing something you don't like. So I think make sure that you're as good as you can be, put a lot of work into it, and maybe it won't be rewarded immediately, but also do it for the right reason. And the right reason is because you enjoy it and you want to do it well, not because you want to be a rock star and you can only have to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, who doesn't want to do that?
Riley, what are your thoughts? Any tips, any insights that you could possibly share?
It is about collaboration and working together. It's not just venues, but it's a government involvement as well. But we must bring the punter along for the ride. And we rely on those people to stand in front of the band, to buy the music, to cheer them along, and that's what I think we will see. But for a lot of cities, I think we're going to see opportunities with festivals, because people aren't travelling away, and they are still going to look for that network. And you only have to look at the success stories. Some are in New Zealand, some are out at parks, where they pick a theme and they run something which is incredible. And I think we can do that in other regional cities as well, and achieve a result which is based on the arts. It's about music. Yes, it's not necessarily about an individual venue, it's about the community and it's about the city as a whole. And that's how we need to approach the way forward, is not thinking about us as individuals, but thinking about our colleagues and in the industry as well as your bandmates, because now more than ever we are going to rely on each other, not just for our financial well-being, but it is an emotional thing that we need to be careful of.
Music is so important to emotional well-being in many cases. Gabe, any thoughts about
basically what Tino was saying, like with how I think maybe it is time for, if you've been playing an instrument for a while, like keep practicing. It's a good time for you to get heaps better at it, or it's a good time for your band to write more songs and record. Like it's a great time to record, like, because there's not as much happening around you, like other things. And I mean, rather than focusing on trying to do an Australia-wide tour or trying to go like, I mean, like we were going to go over to Chicago and record with Steve Albini again, but now we've just decided, you know what, let's just do a couple shows, get some money, buy some microphones, we'll just record it ourselves. Like, let's just get better at recording music ourselves. Like, it's another skill you can develop. Like, so yeah.
Indeed. Is there anything else anyone would like to add before we close our conversation tonight? Is there anything else that you would like to say?
There's been disruptions before.
Yes.
And you just got to see the silver lining to that disruption, I think. So the biggest thing for me, I know, is I've had time to think about things I want to do in the future, and I've started working on them already. I think, that's a good model for especially young musicians. What do you want to do? Put a plan in place and work really hard at it.
Indeed. Rolly, anything else?
Plenty of opportunities now. I think rather than look at the negatives, I think there is a lot of positive out there. There will be opportunities for young people to get into the hospitality industry. There's going to be opportunities for them to get into music. We're going to see a growth in this field. And if we get the support that the live music industry deserves, I think we're going to see an incredible resurgence in
I've got an idea. The musicians could become baristas in their baristas in their breaks. So you turn up, you play, then you serve coffee,
Kind of already doing
you're
that
on
a
a
little
wage,
bit.
an hourly wage.
Gabriel's already
He's
doing
good at it.
That's $70 an hour, I reckon. You think?
It's pretty good.
All right, well, I'm going to thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rolly. Thank you, Gabe. Really appreciate the thought that you put in before we came here, and I guess, fleshing out the ideas. No one knows all the right answers. I think one of the things to come out of our conversation tonight is indeed the collaboration, the opportunity for collaboration, and new opportunities are going to come from this, just like we've seen before. So thank you very much. I'd like to also thank the New South Wales Government Business Connect program, which is a dedicated program funded by the New South Wales Government and delivered through a network of independent service providers to help you start or grow your small business. If you want small business advice, come to the Business Connect program. You call 1300 134 359 or email connect@treasury.nsw.gov.au. Please like us on Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram. Google the Business Centre if you'd like to connect with us, and we can get you to an appointment right away. Finally, I'd like to thank Fordtronic, the team who put on all of our webcasts and can help you also if you've got a webcast that you would like to do. Reach out to us if you'd like to contact those guys. If you'd like to contact Mark, Rolly or Gabe, also again, please contact us and we'll pass on your details. But no matter what stage you're on in your journey in your business, please come and get some help. You don't need to do it alone. Thank you and good night.